Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reading an article from Axios, which has become very popular because it's talked about a number of things going on in the United States and in Israel and just around the world in general. And so I think it's for us to touch base and talk about this. So this article is on the Behind the Curtain column by Jim Vanday and Mike Allen. Rattled United States government fears war could spread. So they start off talking about how never before have we talked to so many top government officials who in private are so worried about so many overseas conflicts at once. So I've talked about this in other videos where we have to recognize this as a multi-front war that is the start of World War III. And I talk about how we need to separate the trees from the forest and be able to look at both of them separately and then see the connections between the trees and the forest and how they work together to make this complex system. And really, if you want to look at this from kind of a 30,000 foot view, is Ukraine war is the Eastern European front between the Western hegemony and the multipolar bloc, or the Zionist versus the anti-Zionist coalition, however you want to look at it. Then you have the Middle East Holy Land war between Israel and the United States versus Palestine and what I suspect is many other forces soon. You already have Lebanon getting involved in the form of Hezbollah, not officially getting involved, but it sounds like they might soon. This is before Friday's announcement by Hezbollah, so I don't know if they get involved because this video will be posted afterwards. Yemen has declared war, or at least the current acting government, even though it's not the internationally recognized one. So there are various forces involved on both sides of this, but we can consider this another front of a multi-part war where the United States is getting spread very thin. I personally am far more aggressive than China, so if I was in China's position, I would be pressuring Taiwan a lot more right now. But China also understands the practices of Sun Tzu, where they can just wait patiently as their enemy makes mistakes and declines. I'm not as capable of that as others would be, but yeah, if I was China, I would probably take a more active role there. You also see places like Latin America, which I talked about this as well, where I was wondering how a front could be opened up in Latin America. I thought it would be in Mexico, but it looks like the front's actually going to be opened up because it looks like they're supporting Palestine to a large degree. Then you have in Africa the various coups against French colonial authority. And so you're just seeing over and over and over again that various Western puppets, various Western theaters of war are getting pressured by the multipolar bloc, by the anti-Zionist coalition. And so American officials are worried about that. That's what they're saying here. So why does it matter? We don't like to sound dire, but to sound a siren of clinical, clear-eyed realism, U.S. officials say this confluence of crises poses epic concern and historic danger. So America is at its weakest point since the collapse of the Soviet Union, and its enemies are at the strongest point since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the United States is being spread thin by all of these enemies at once instead of being able to do like it typically does, which is just beat up on one enemy at a time. The enemies have coalesced into a faction very rapidly against it. So behind the scenes, officials tell us that inside the White House, this was the heaviest, most chilling week since Biden took office just over 1,000 days ago. Former defense secretary, okay, so this is the worst time they've had so far in Joe Biden's presidential term. Former Defense Secretary Bob Gates, who ran the Pentagon under presidents of both parties, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, tells us America is facing the most crises since World War II ended 78 years ago. I completely agree. People tend to cite the Cuban Missile Crisis, but again, that was just kind of a flashpoint. If it did end up popping off, it would have been a nuclear war immediately. This is the most close we've come to a conventional war, a world war, since World War II. And you can see this in a variety of different ways. Another way is the amount of warships in the Mediterranean Sea is the most since World War II. And remember, the Mediterranean Sea is very close to where World Wars I and World War II popped off, and so that should be of grave concern to you. So Bob Gates explains the White House system's overload like this. There's this gigantic funnel that sits over the table in the Situation Room. And all the problems in the world end up coming through that funnel to the same 8 or 10 people. There's a limit to the bandwidth those 8 or 10 people can have. Okay, so this is the part that made me want to really go over this article because I was hearing about it elsewhere. And I don't think other people emphasize this enough, but I'm really curious about how many of those 8 to 10 people who are making all of the decisions, all of the important decisions for America's supposed democracy, how many of those are actually elected officials? And then of those elected officials, how many were legitimately elected instead of just through corruption and through bribery and through other mechanisms? I would hazard a guess that pretty much none of them are legitimate officials that are representing the people, especially because we can see that they're not asking for a ceasefire like the majority of Americans want. So these 8 to 10 people, this is the deep state. This is the shadow government that is likely unelected, and if they are elected, they're not elected legitimately. Okay, so it goes on to say, not one of the crises can be solved and checked off. All 5 could spiral into something much bigger. Okay, so they're going to name some of the ones that I named earlier and then a couple others. Israel's response to the Hamas terrorist attack. They keep calling it a terrorist attack, but these are freedom fighters fighting against an occupation. They, as far as I can tell, did not attack civilians directly. There were some caught in the crossfire, but all of the stories that have come out of Israel have been refuted of them attacking civilians, attacking children. There were actually 0 babies between the ages of 0 to 3, given Israel's own death statistics of October 7th. So people keep calling it a Hamas terrorist attack. I'm not seeing it. Yes, it was an attack by Hamas, but they have every right to attack another country that is an occupying force under international law. And Russia has concluded this. A variety of other nations have talked about this as well. And it is international law. Not the rules-based order that America made up, but it is international law. And so if you can cite me some stories of actual things that have happened that has supporting evidence instead of just Israeli lies, I would love to see it. That anything that shows that Hamas has actually conducted a terrorist attack. And I'm not saying this as a Hamas supporter. I'm not a Hamas supporter whatsoever. Completely disagreed with them on the Syria situation. They were on the opposite side of the Syrian government. I am very pro-Syrian government. So I just want to see some evidence. And Israel has come up with a variety of fake pieces of evidence that have been very easily refuted. And so I'm just questioning why they keep calling it a terrorist attack. Anyways, and growing fear of a spreading war that reaches to Iran and beyond, officials point to the protests, threats, and deadly anti-American warnings of Arab nations after they thought incorrectly Israel struck a hospital. They call it incorrectly, but we know for sure that they did do this. So this is the timeline, okay? Israel attacked a hospital. They said, hey, we're going to attack this hospital again. We're giving you this warning to evacuate. They couldn't evacuate because it's a hospital and people were there and couldn't move. And so Israel attacked the hospital again and said, oh, it was actually Hamas that did this. Remember, this is the hospital that they previously attacked the Saturday before. They gave a warning that they were going to attack it again. They attacked it again and blamed Hamas. And there are actually people in the West who believe this. I'm assuming these are the same people that believe that Nord Stream pipeline attacked itself. I mean, like, what is going on in the minds of these people that they think it's legitimate? And we also know that Israel has attacked other hospitals. They've attacked other churches. They've attacked refugee camps. They admit to all of it. So, like, pretending like this wasn't Israel in this specific case, it's just ridiculous, pretending it was Hamas. Anyways, Israel struck a hospital in Gaza, killing hundreds. That was the Christian hospital. This is a preview of what they fully expect will be a worldwide response to the expected Israeli invasion of Gaza. Yeah, we've seen that nonstop. Countries cutting off ties with Israel, not recognizing the legitimacy of Israel as a nation state, et cetera, et cetera. The U.S. is deploying multiple U.S. carrier groups, more troops, more warships than have been seen in that area since World War II, et cetera, et cetera. The U.S. is deploying 2 aircraft carriers to the region. Something I should note here is we're not sure if one of them is just relieving the other one because the other one has been there for a while. We still need a few days from the making of this video to know for sure. A U.S. Navy destroyer on Thursday shot down missiles from Yemen that appeared headed towards Israel. U.S. troops were fired on this week by drones in Syria and Iraq. Okay, so U.S. got directly involved by shooting down missiles that were fired from Yemen. Okay, so that's a direct involvement in war. United States is actively a participant of this war already, just from that action alone. People tend to say, well, if you're providing supplies and equipment, that's not directly involved in war. But if you are shooting down missiles from one nation attacking another nation, that is very unequivocally making you a participant in the war. So the second thing that is being discussed in these meetings is Vladimir Putin meeting in China this week with Xi Jinping to further strengthen their anti-America alliance. I would call it a multipolar bloc alliance or the anti-Zionist alliance. And In a new Foreign Affairs article that top officials are sharing, Gates argues that both leaders believe America and other big democracies are past their prime and have entered an irreversible decline. Putin and Xi sniff weakness and are activating on many fronts, top administration officials tell us. Yeah, I don't think they want things to happen to this extent this quickly. They would rather America just slowly decline. So I don't know if I fully agree with this, but I also don't think that they're unhappy that the entire Islamic world is on their side now. I think they were definitely waffling about what was happening in Ukraine. I actually heard that some Islamists were fighting for Ukraine, and then Ukraine came out on the side of Israel genociding Palestine, and then they just left. So they lost those mercenaries. They lost any support from the Muslim world there. And another thing is that's really been interesting for me is the coalescing of two sides here, where you could potentially make the argument to be on the side of Palestine and Ukraine. And you could also potentially make the argument of being on the side of Israel and Russia. But most people aren't doing that. Most people have coalesced into you're either multipolar bloc or you're anti-multipolar bloc, or you're Zionist or you're anti-Zionist, right? People have taken the side of Russia and Palestine, or they've taken the side of Ukraine and Israel. And that's been really interesting to see. I also don't agree here that America and other big democracies are actually democratic in nature. We see that right now when the majority of Americans want a ceasefire and the government is not having a ceasefire. Again, it's 80% of Democrats want a ceasefire, Democratic president not asking for a ceasefire. So is that actually a democracy? Really? Is it? Okay. So this article goes on to say this Reuters headline says it all. Russia says it is coordinating Middle East policy with China, and they're also coordinating with Iran and with other multipolar world bloc countries. Get used to it, nerds. Sucks to suck, America. Okay, that was my evil laugh. How'd I do? Let me know in the comment box below. So third is a malicious Iran. Again, this is propaganda. Ridiculous to call Iran malicious. None of the terrorist attacks that have occurred in the West, this is just factual, have been from Shia Islam, or at least very few of them have. It's all been Sunni Islam. Again, I'm not saying anything about either of those denominations there, but Iran has clearly just wanted to be left alone, to be independent, not be a puppet of the United States. So calling them malicious is pretty ridiculous because the United States has always been the aggressive force. The United States assassinated Soleimani in a third nation, which violates all international laws and norms on the subject. You're not supposed to do that. Soleimani was on a diplomatic mission, and he was in Iraq, and he was assassinated by the United States. So anyways, this is a malicious Iran. It's unclear how involved Iran was in orchestrating or assisting the Hamas terrorist attack, but officials seem certain there are ties. More worrisome, U.S. officials fear Hezbollah, a much bigger terrorist group than Hamas, funded by Iran, will strike the moment Israel gets stuck in Gaza. Yeah, absolutely. I think they will. I don't think they're a terrorist group. I think they're a liberation, freedom fighting group. But yes, I will say this pretty unequivocally that I don't like Hamas particularly much because of the side they took in Syria. But I do think that Hezbollah, how do I want to say this? I think Hezbollah is a better organization. They sided with Syria. I can't say I support them or I'm pro Hezbollah because this is YouTube, or this video is at the very least going to be posted on YouTube. So I can't express that, but Hezbollah has supported Syria's legitimate government. And so yeah, that's what I'm going to leave it at. Biden said Thursday night in his Oval Office address, Iran is supporting Russia and Ukraine and supporting Hamas and other groups in the region. Okay, the fourth issue is then there's the unhinged leader of North Korea. Again, this is just propaganda. What makes him unhinged? He's looking out for the interests of his nation, Kim Jong-un, and his frequent testing of long-range nuclear-capable missiles. As Gates points out, the combined nuclear arsenal of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea could within a few years be nearly double the size of America's. Yeah, again, as I talked about, America is losing on all fronts. A new weapon is being deployed, so this is number 5. In all these conflicts, a massive spread of doctored or wholly fake videos to manipulate what people see and think in real time. This is hilarious because every incident of supposed atrocity that Israel has come up with, they've come up with fake videos, they've come up with fake pictures. They've been shown to be fake. It's just ridiculous propaganda over and over and over again. And so this is just projection. They're saying that the multipolar bloc is doing things that actually the West Zionist factions are doing. So this goes on to say the architects of these new technologies in background conversations with us after demonstrating new capabilities soon to be released say even the sharpest eyes looking for fake videos will have an impossible time detecting what's real. So they're going to have a column on this coming soon, going deeper into the topic. So fake videos on top of bots, fake people, and fake written content is being used aggressively by all anti-American actors, intelligence officials say. Some experts estimate that more than 90% of content on the internet will soon be fake or manipulated. Okay, so funny thing is, there was a study that came out talking about bots and propaganda for Russia and Ukraine. It turned out that about 90% of the propaganda and bots were Ukrainian propaganda and bots. So again, this is just projection. They're saying that the multipolar bloc, the anti-Zionist faction, is doing things that actually the Zionists, the anti-multipolar bloc are doing. So just ridiculous stuff coming out of this article here. So it goes on to say what scares officials is how all 5 threats could fuse into one. They already have fused into one. This is the multipolar bloc. This is the anti-Zionist coalition that I wanted over a decade ago to form. The State Department on Thursday issued a rare worldwide caution warning U.S. travelers abroad of increased tensions in various locations around the world that raise the potential for terrorist attacks, demonstrations, or violent actions against U.S. citizens and interests. So these simultaneous threats are hitting at the very moment the American political system seems and sometimes is literally broken. Yeah, it is. I mean, the American system does not represent Americans. Life expectancy is down. People don't have hope for the future. People don't trust their government. People are committing suicide at increasingly high rates. They're addicted to drugs at increasingly high rates. America is broken. It's gone. You are watching the kind of slow fall of a nation, and eventually it's going to fall all at once, like steep decline. But right now we're on this slow descent, and some people aren't realizing it because they're hidden from a lot of things going on in America. But if you're looking at things holistically, looking at the forest instead of the trees, you could see that things are dying in America. The situation is rotted to the core. And if you're just focused on a few trees that are doing somewhat well, you're not seeing the entire forest. So you see these simultaneous threats are hitting the very moment. Okay, we went over that. It's not just that Republicans don't have a House Speaker. They do have a House Speaker right now. He's pro-Israel and seems to be pro-Ukraine again. Ridiculous. People don't believe in that anymore, but the government does. So the government's not representative of the people. They can't get one elected, or that we might shut down the government in the middle of this mess, or that we're hurtling towards another toxic presidential election, which big chunks of both parties want different candidates. Yeah, that's completely the case. A lot of Americans are pro-ceasefire or even anti-Zionist right now, and you're not seeing presidential candidates meet the needs of the people. There's actually a lot of Muslim Americans who are absolutely refusing to vote for Joe Biden for his reelection at this point because of how he's handling the current Palestinian genocide going on. Anyways, former top intelligence officials tell us domestic unrest is one of their biggest fears. Whether it's triggered by court rulings against former President Trump or protests over war in the Middle East, Biden allies frame these flare-ups as a reminder that global chaos requires common experience. With age comes wisdom. Ron Klain, Biden's first chief of staff, told us, but there has been a total collapse of people's trust in the opposing party, the media, what they see or share on social media platforms, and even the top secret intelligence the government relies on to measure these threats. This, as much as the 5 individual threats above, is what worries us, worries officials. They know things could get worse fast and require tough actions fast. No one knows whether Congress or the public could unite in an emergency. So really interesting stuff going on here. I'm going to talk about all this further in other articles in the future, but man, this is a wild, wild time in America right now. Like it's hard for me to fully convey to you what is going on right now. And if you haven't been paying attention, you're not seeing the whole picture, but things are bad and they're going to get way, way worse. Okay. So I feel like I'm shilling for moving out of the country, but I really do think that if you have the opportunity to work remotely, I would encourage you to move to a country or a location within a country that is unlikely to see fighting during World War III, because it's really right around the corner. Like I've been shocked by how quickly things have been going. But anyways, if you found this video to be informative, please let us know. It helps us in the algorithm if you give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channels on both YouTube and Rumble for more content. Please give us a a comment in the comment box below, any questions, concerns, critiques you might have. I think I'm going to read the rest of the articles by this behind the curtain column. Yes, it does frame things in a very propagandistic way, but it is very informative about what's going on, and they do give some hints about the deep state underneath, such as the 8 to 10 people who are making all the decisions, and most of them are not elected officials. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.